We are broadcasting.
Well, hello.
Hello.
It's always good to speak to you. So we're going to discuss how to win friends and influence people today.
Now. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to argue about that. Have we got a word of the day?
That's where I was going.
Today?
That's where I was going. I thought we were more in tune there, but we do have a word of the day.
We do.
And it's fallacious.
Fallacious.
And there's a couple of definitions. One is embodying a fallacy, and the next is tending to deceive or mislead. What do you think about that?
Tending to deceive or mislead. It sounds quite apt for, sort of how to win friends. In that, how to win friends and influence people is the exact opposite. So it's completely non or unfallacious in that it's all about being. Is it being honest? I'm not entirely sure. It's always being honest, is it? Because how to win friends and influence people is about not upsetting people. It's about not being pugnacious.
Are you referring to the last word of the day?
I certainly am. You see, I always think that I forget them all, and mostly I do. But pugnacious is because I think of it as a little pug of pugs. It's like pugnation rather than pugnacious. I imagine like a country that's just full of pugs, and they're all being kind of all shouty and bitey and so that's how I remember it. It's quite an easy one to remember, pugnacious, which means
it's surprising how efficient those little mind sort of games can be, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
so how easily you can remember stuff based on those little tricks.
I know. So as they're tricks, could they potentially be the word of the day for today, which was fallacious?
I don't think they're a fallacy. I think they're true. I think they're a good way.
Yeah.
They could be good trick, okay. I suppose. Or they refer to it now. Some people refer to that type of thing as hacks, which I don't tend to do that, but hack your brain type stuff.
Yeah, hack for me has got negative connotations. I think of people stealing all my money from the bank after I've done some online shopping or something, which I don't do, by the way. I use one card only to do any shopping online. Yeah, so
good to know.
I'm a bit nervous about the hacking. Yeah. So how to win friends and influence people. Now this is a book that, funny enough, you introduced me to again. So it's a bit of a funny story. Secret Santa, wasn't it?
I didn't know you were going to mention this, but you had read it before then, though, hadn't you? Or you'd listened to it, one of the two. But I
think I'd listened to it. Yeah.
We did a Secret Santa, and I bought you a physical version of it just because we'd listened to it and we both liked it. Yeah,
that's right. So it was a Secret Santa in our office, and all of you happened to get me, which was a lucky event, really. And I have no idea what I gave to anybody else, or who I had, or what anybody else received. But I think there was something like a limit. Is that right? Something like that.
It was a fiver, yeah. You had to spend £5. I didn't spend £5 on the book. It was more expensive than that, but I didn't care.
Wow, there you go. That's friendship for you. So that's how to win friends and influence people, because the book actually influenced me quite a lot. So the funny thing is that when we all had to open our presents together, the whole office, and when I opened my present, everyone thought it was a there were not everyone, but there was a lot of comments about it, like, oh, Tom saying Jake doesn't have any friends and doesn't know how.
It was an inside joke, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah, it was. But yeah, it was that was great. I still have that copy, and my next door neighbor showed me his very dog-eared copy as well. So it's very well known. The book has been around for a long, long time. It's been around for well, it was first published in 1936, and sold over 30 million copies in physical form, which makes it one of the best-selling books of all time, apparently, according to Wikipedia. And it's also one of the most influential books of all time, for sure. So it's been updated several times, and apparently, it came out, as I say, in 1936, but it was based on Dale Carnegie, the author's. The author had these 14-week courses where he realized that there's training about all sorts of things, but there was no training on how to help people with their interpersonal skills. And in any business, or not just business, but any relationship at all, interpersonal skills are absolutely vital. And so Dale Carnegie, so there's all these things that you learn, but there's nothing, literally zero, available to help people with their interpersonal skills. So he put together these courses eventually, and held them in hotels and things like this. And eventually, then in 1936, it was made into a book. It was revised in 1981, revised again in 2011, with a new edition called "How to Win Friends and Influence People in the Digital Age," written by Dale Carnegie, obviously, as Dale Carnegie is no longer around. But it is an amazing book in all its guises, and it's difficult to describe. It's just interesting, and it's useful in everything, because it's basically how to improve your relationships, business, personal, romantic, whatever they may be.
Well, I was going to, because my feelings are that this book better than I do. I was going to start off with the one thing that stuck with me through reading this book. And you can't say that about every book that you read. In most cases, you forget it and you never think about it again. But the one thing which has stuck with me, which is a principle in the book, is if you criticize people, then it's either met with a justification or resentment, meaning that there is no point in criticizing anyone ever, because it's not going to do anything.
True.
Now, I mean, there are obviously ways of doing things. So in some instances, you might say constructive feedback in some form is very valuable, but an actual criticism, you're not very good at X or something like that. The principle is either someone justifies why they've done something, and so they ignore what you've said, or they just don't like you very much, and that's
or even worse than those two things is that they take it to heart and consider themselves to be not very good at whatever that may be. If you were not a very fast runner at school and your gym instructor said you're not very good at sports, then you may be great at badminton or tennis or archery or slacklining or skiing or any number of different sports, snooker, you name it. You could be great at any of these things, but you might just not be very good at running. But because they said you're not good at sports, you may then take that to heart and just feel that your self-confidence just goes. And as we know, self-confidence is very important in any sport. And I mean, I'm using sports as to illustrate this point, but it could be anything. You might not be very good at maths at school, and your teacher says that you're not the brightest kid in school, and you think, well, I'm not very bright, and you may be fantastic at another subject.
The example you gave, I mean, the world is rife with examples of teachers, or I think the word they use in America is like, there's a specific job role that people have, and they're told that all they're suited for is, to be a bin collector or prison ward or something like that. Warden rather.
Yeah.
And it's at that particular age, you're very susceptible to that type of criticism. So you think, oh, maybe I can't do it.
I had this. So they're called career advisors. I remember I had one of these at school, where they, at quite an early age, they try and nail down what career you want. And I remember I came and sat down in front of this guy, and we had like about 2 minutes, and the whole school did it, or everyone in our year. And I sat down, and he asked me a series of questions. And I remember one of the questions was, do you like to work indoors or outdoors? And my answer to that was, well, that depends, which wasn't one of the answers that he could write down, because he obviously had a tick box. So it got him very angry with me. He said, what do you mean it depends? And I said, well, if I'm living in a hot country, I'd rather be outdoors. But if I'm living in a cold country, I'd rather be indoors. And he said, don't be obstinate. He got really angry with me. And I was absolutely right, because I am now in Spain where it's hot, and yet I'm indoors, and I'd much rather be outdoors. Whereas in the UK, if it was rainy and cold, I wouldn't want to be outdoors. So, I was absolutely bang on. I was completely correct. And I wasn't trying to be pugnacious, and I wasn't trying to be facetious or anything. I was simply, giving him my honest answer. But he bit my head off about it and recommended that I should join the armed forces.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So,
join the army if you're going to be like that. Oh, get some discipline.
Yeah, it's crazy. But not
that there's anything wrong with joining the army.
I came across one the other day where, and this I think is pertinent right now. And John Lennon was asked at school as well. Now, John Lennon, obviously being one of the founding members of the Beatles, which is arguably the best band that ever came about. Certainly, it was a paradigm shift amongst music. It really changed the way that modern music is. So anyway, he was one of the Beatles, and he lived with his aunt, and his aunt always told him, John, she said, the most important thing in life is to be happy. Now, it doesn't matter what happens. You don't have to be the richest. You don't have to be the most successful. You don't have to be. You'll be successful if you're happy. So happy is the most important. And so when John Lennon was asked at school what he wanted to be when he was grown up, of course his answer was, I want to be happy. So the teacher, completely failing to understand, I guess, the whole concept of happiness, was so sort of entrenched in his own perspective about what was a required answer, that he bit John Lennon's head off and said, John Lennon, you don't understand what I'm saying. I'm asking you what you want to be when you're grown up. To which John Lennon replied, no, you don't understand what you're saying. I want to be happy. And there you are. I'm not sure John Lennon ever really became happy. I don't think he's the happiest person in the world, but he definitely lived his own truth, which is probably more than the teacher was doing, seeing as the teacher seemed to be getting angry with the child and not being able to understand their point of view.
Do you know if they still do careers advisors these days?
I'd be amazed if they don't.
Well, I mean, it's a very interesting concept, actually, to say what you'd like to do in the future, considering we don't even know what jobs will be available in the future. So if you take this example, can you imagine if you said to your careers advisor, I'd like to be a podcaster?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
It doesn't exist. That job doesn't exist yet.
No, there'll be, I think, I was thinking about this the other day. I think we're at an age now where there is simultaneously more opportunity than ever before and less opportunity at the same time. And the less opportunity is around traditional, well-entrenched careers, and, such as the retail industry has had a huge shake-up recently, with more online shopping going on. And the large, bigger sort of companies, being capitalist, this is the way things work, is that money is power, and the largest companies get the biggest share. And people generally, they like to shop from, for the large part, from companies that they know. So a challenge that you and I have, Tom, is to try and get the smaller retailers to compete with these sort of bigger names like Amazon and things like this, And it's a challenge, and it's something that you can do if you've got the right skill set. But it's ever changing, and marketing as a job has changed radically. I mean, it's such a different thing now from the old times where you were putting a newspaper advert in, and then the telly came along and changed advertising, and then so on and so forth. And now where we're at is incredible. So yeah, half the jobs that exist, even taxi drivers, they're probably not going to be around for much longer. Things that have been around since the Victorian times, where you could hail a cab, and okay, it might be a horse-drawn carriage then, but it's essentially the same job. And it's going to be a robot soon. So yeah, you're right. Careers advisors.
Way off topic, but did you see? I know you check out the trending news when you wake up in the morning. Yeah. I don't even know whether we've talked about this. Did you see the fact that there's the first flying car?
No, I didn't. But I did notice that there have been a lot of different companies making flying cars. What's his name? Elon Musk. What's his name?
Elon Musk, yeah.
Musk.
I don't know if he's done a flying car yet.
No,
it's electric stuff, isn't it, that he does?
He was on a TED Talk, and he said that he doesn't believe the future is flying vehicles at all. He said it's bad enough having roads, but having, potentially badly maintained flying vehicles everywhere that career out of control, or, is that hubcap on squarely, and it falls off, kills someone who happens to be walking underneath. He seems to think that the future is boring tunnels underneath the ground, or potentially having tunnels above the ground, I suppose, and having some kind of vehicle that goes through the tunnels and could do incredibly safe, very, very fast journeys. I don't know what the future is, nor does he, nor does anyone. But what I do know is that flying cars are definitely something that flying cars and fully automated cars as well. They're in the news a lot at the moment.
So it's the first one. It was in, I believe it was Holland, and it's not as you would imagine it to be. It's like a two-seater helicopter with wheels. So it works the same as a helicopter, but it also drives. It's sort of like a very small car, but it also flies.
I mean, I love the idea of it myself. I've always wanted to fly. So that's to me is brilliant. But I mean, I think it's going to be fascinating to see where things go. But I'd imagine most of these things will be fully automated at some point. So you will just get in it and it will fly you to wherever. It's a bit like
you plug in your destination and it just takes you there.
Yeah. Well, again, there was another TED Talk by a guy, again, keeping completely off topic, but there's another TED Talk by a guy in California whose job is to do some kind of future innovations and things like this. And he was saying, it's called The Next 100 Years of Your Life. And it starts off, he talks about, if the whole of human civilization was compressed into an average human life, by the time you get to 40, where we are now, he said that, we didn't even start learning to drive until we were about 38 or something. So everything has gone really, really slow, and progress we didn't start learning to write until probably in our late 20s. You know, things have started, and technology is progressing faster and faster and faster. And so now we're 40, we're at where we are now. So by the time we're 42, it's completely unimaginable. We'll have cracked the genome completely. We'll be able to eradicate all known diseases. Then we'll be able to identify and quickly eradicate all unknown diseases as they come. We'll be able to, modify their genome and eradicate them. We'll be able to do this. We'll be able to do that. All sorts of stuff. It's interesting to see. I mean, you know, you want to have blue eyes instead of brown, then you can just eradicate. You can just change your DNA. You know, in real time. He's suggesting that in 100 years' time, these things are probably going to be possible, and it may be that there's immortality then as well. You know, it's incredible how technology is developing, and you know, we don't really know. But the flying, I think the idea of having flying cars is awesome. I love the idea of having no traffic in a city centre, just being completely pedestrianised. It's just so much nicer. Where I am currently in Spain, I'm temporarily living in a little white Andalusian village where most of the roads are pedestrian. And it's just so lovely. You just forget how nice it is just to wander around the streets without ever worrying about cars or, you know, and the kids can just run around and play. And it's just such a lovely environment. And I very much welcome having the roads back for pedestrians. Anyway, that's totally off subject. So
we've gone into the future and we should be going into the past.
We should be, yeah. 1936, in fact.
What did you, or, you know, I know there's plenty of things that we can talk about with respect to the book, but what are the things which you took from the book, which you remember kind of?
You can't ever win an argument. In the book, he talks about a time when he's at a dinner party with a lot of very well-known sort of important people in New York or something at that time, and he was a guest at this very posh dinner party. And during the conversation, someone quoted something and said it was from the Bible. No, said it was from Shakespeare. And Dale Carnegie said, "I'm sorry, I just have to correct you there. It isn't from Shakespeare. It's actually from the Bible." To which his friend, who, you know, he'd come as a +1, and his friend kicked him under the table. And he was like, "Oh, why has he kicked me?" And the reason is that nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants someone to be corrected. It may be that half a dozen people, oh no. And then the guy said, no, it's definitely from Shakespeare. And he said, no, it's from the Bible. And so they had a sort of mini argument there. And it was very unpleasant for everybody at the table. He
you can imagine people going like, awkward.
Yeah, awkward. Yeah, it was awkward for everybody. Exactly. Because he'd embarrassed this guy, because this guy, he was in the middle of telling people it doesn't really matter the source of the information. It's context that's important. And so he was in mid-flow, and then suddenly he's been corrected by somebody. It wasn't necessary to do that. And there may have been other people who were there at the time who also knew it was from the Bible, and it doesn't really matter, but it created that awkward moment. And for sure, he wouldn't ever be invited there. And he'd also embarrassed the guy who was invited him and invited him as a +1. So all in all, it was a disaster. And his friend told him, you know, the next time you come across someone who you know is making a mistake, don't correct them, and definitely don't have an argument. You can't ever win an argument. And the reason you can't win an argument is because if you feel that you have won the argument, then all you've done is humiliated the other person. And nobody on God's green earth likes to be humiliated, especially not publicly so. They're not going to respect you. They're not going to like you for it. And that's even if they know you're right, which quite often we unreasonably try to defend our own position, even if we're wrong. So you can't ever win an argument. Much better to avoid it. And that's one of the key things in the book. In fact, the book is broken into different sections. It's got 6 major sections. One is fundamental techniques in handling people. The second one is 6 ways to make people like you. The third one is 12 ways to win people to your way of thinking, which is probably something, that he could have benefited from himself at that dinner party. The other one is be a leader, how to change people without giving offense or arousing resentment. Then there's letters that produce miraculous results, and 7 rules for making your home a happier place. So 7 rules for making your home happier. Just to give you a bit of context, rule number 1 is don't nag. And this comes down to, nobody wants to be nagged. It's just not necessary. Number 2, don't try and make your partner over. So don't try and improve your partner. You hear a lot of women say, oh, he's a fixer-upper, this guy. He's a bit rough and ready, but, I'll turn him into the kind of guy I really want. Well, that's never going to work. Number 3 is don't criticize. Number 4 is give honest appreciation. Number 5 is pay little attention. So pay attention to the little things. 6 is be courteous, and 7, and this is the perhaps the funniest one of them all, is read a good book on the sexual side of marriage. Keep it spicy. So these are generally just this section was, funny enough, was in the original 1936 edition of the book, but then it was omitted from the revised version that went out in 1981. Not quite sure why. But yeah, so all of those things, it goes into a great deal of detail. But it's about giving respect to other people. If you criticize someone, we've all known someone who you hear them criticizing, in the office or down the pub or perhaps even in your own home, they're criticizing somebody. And you just think, well, they're criticizing this person now, but the next time they see this person, they're going to be nice to them. And they're going to say, oh, how are you doing? How's your day? And blah, blah, blah. So if they're criticizing one person behind their back, then what are they doing behind my back when I'm not there? Mm. And this is a really negative thing because it makes you a little bit paranoid and you can't trust that person. And to me, the base of all relationships is trust. You've got to have the trust. And if trust is damaged, it's very difficult to get it back. It's very easy to damage it, difficult to get it back. But if you criticize someone, it's very negative. You're sending negative thoughts out into the environment. You should be focusing on positive things. Everyone has positive things. And it's like how to correct behavior. It's how to correct behavior in someone if that's what you wanted to do. You're not going to do. In the old days, everyone used to tell children off a lot. And arguably, children are a little bit more out of control now than they were. But at the same time, I think generally we got it kind of right, in that it's much better to give positive. One of my daughters was quite upset because she did an maths exam, and she didn't get a very good result. And she was very upset about this. And partly because she gets really good results in almost all her other subjects. But in maths, she struggles. She doesn't get on with it very well. And unfortunately, in the powers that be, have decided that maths is a core subject. Now, I totally disagree with the fact that maths should be a core subject. I think it's obviously important that people have a basic level of maths. But they teach maths to a much higher level than is required for almost all people in almost all jobs. If you want to be an architect or an engineer or something like this, then you need to continue and you need to be good at maths. Clearly, my daughter doesn't enjoy maths, so she's not going to want to pursue a career where maths is a key integral part of that career. A simple level of maths which should be fine for her, and yet she's compelled by the current system to get a good result in maths or work really hard or be condemned, even if she gets 90% or more on all of her other subjects, things that she's really suited to. And so this upsets me. I'm not upset with her. I'm upset with the system because it's antiquated, and it's not. It needs to be more. It needs to be changed and made more individual. It needs to identify individual children's skills, and it needs to be adapted on a one-to-one basis to really make the most out of each child. And it currently, in my opinion, is failing dramatically in doing that. But a lot of children, a lot of parents may have been angry or upset, or you should have worked harder, you should have tried harder. And I really don't think that would help a child. I think a child would be kind of, it would be, they'd hate maths even more. Do you know what I mean? And so I just highlighted all the other things that my daughter's very good at. And I said to her, when you want to be older and you're looking for a job or something that you want to do, then anything that's to do with maths, it's probably not going to be for you. She likes the arts. She's good at languages. Maybe these are somewhere that, she would fare better. So it's about, it's about giving encouragement rather than criticizing. The book is so complex. How to win people to your way of thinking. The only way to get the best out of an argument is to avoid it, which we've already discussed before. Begin in a friendly way. A lot of people would say you're a manager and you have an employee and the employee didn't do a good job. So a lot of people would say, you know what? You're kind of good at this, because they kind of get the idea that you should start with something positive. They say you did a really good job there, but, and when you use the word but, it negates the first part of the sentence, because but is a negative. So you're saying, and people aren't stupid, they know that if you say, you did a good job on this, but you didn't do that very well, then they know that you're just trying to butter them up. They weren't born yesterday, that the first bit is just trying to make you feel good. But when you use the word but, it's a negative, and that's what they're going to focus on. So it's kind of not being honest with the speech pattern. And in the book, it sort of talks about using positive speech patterns. And we've talked about this before in a previous podcast with one of our guests.
Andy Green.
Yes, that's right. And it's about
but was using lemons.
Yeah, that's it.
Replace but with and.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and. So you did this job well, but you didn't do job 2 very well. Well, no. You did job 1 really well, and you could improve job 2 by doing such and such and such. So in doing that, you are noticing that they did a good job in the first thing, in job 1, and they did well, and that makes them feel appreciated. And you're telling them how they can do job 2 better than they've currently done it. So you're giving them advice, positive advice. So yeah, don't give them lemons.
Reminds me of a thing that you're encouraged to do at the end of the day. I might be wrong, but I think this is Brian Tracy, and he says, at the end of every day, you should say to yourself, what did I do well and what could I do differently? Yeah, absolutely. I really like that. That's a really good thing. There's another thing in the book, and maybe you can tell me. I think it's based on a principle. I don't think these words are actually in the book, but maybe you can let me know. Is that everyone walks around with a sign around them saying "Make you feel important."
Yeah.
Is that in the book, or is that just another way of saying something which is in the book?
To me, it doesn't matter. That's a concept that's definitely very strong in the book, and it's about everyone's favorite word. And everyone's favorite word is their own name, because the world, believe it or not, centers around each and every one of us. Because when you open your eyes or your ears, or you wake up in the morning, you literally are the center of your world. Not for everybody, but for you. And one of the clear things is that, and one of the things it highlights in the world is that a horrible pimple on your forehead in the morning will be more important to you as you're getting ready for work or getting ready for school or just getting ready to start the day. It'll be more important to you than an earthquake that kills 10,000 people in China. And that's probably not the case if you're one of those 10,000 people in China or you're related to them or anything. But for the most part, it's very true. You're more focused on yourself than others. And actually, one of the key things to take away from this is that everybody is the same. We all are more focused on us and our problems, and we're all more interested in our own problems than anybody else's. And so, use people's names, learn people's names. He goes on to mention some of the previous presidents of the United States who made an effort to always remember all of the names of everybody, because there's one thing that people like, it's to be recognized, it's to be appreciated. And there's the best possible way of doing that is to remember their name. I remember we were selling our house. The sale eventually fell through, but we had an estate agent come once to the house. And while he was at the house, he was there maybe 40 minutes, something like that. My two daughters were there, my wife and I. And he took all the details of the house, and then he put the house on the market and all the rest of it. I saw him about 8 months later, bumped into him in the street. And he said, "Oh, hello, Jake, how are you doing?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Yeah, how did the house sale come on?" And I said, "Well, it fell through in the end, and I've got it on the market again," because he wasn't directly dealing with the sale. I must clarify that. And then he said, and how's Elvira? How's Rebecca? How's Laura? And I thought, this is amazing. The guy met my family for just a few minutes, months and months ago, and he meets people all the time. And he remembered the names of my daughters and my wife and myself. I could barely remember his name myself, actually. It was just
he's using some memory techniques there, isn't he? Definitely.
He was. And I was very impressed. And because I read How to Win Friends and Influence People, I showed appreciation. I said, "That is amazing." I can't remember his name. I said, "That's amazing. How do you remember all the names? I'm very, very impressed." And he glowed. You could see him almost blush. He was really, really proud of himself. And we both, and that was it. And we said, yeah, I work hard try and remember things like this. And I showed him some appreciation. He walked away from that meeting feeling, appreciated, a little bit better, from having bumped into me in the street. And we spoke for a few seconds, maybe a minute, 2 minutes tops. But he walked away feeling a little bit better. And I walked away thinking, I've done something nice. I've shown appreciation for him, and I've made his day a little bit better. And it didn't cost me anything. And at the same time, I kind of was appreciative of the skill that he learned. And I thought, this is something that I should probably pay more attention to. And there are loads of studies out there that state that this is one of the most important things that you can do. So don't criticize or condemn or complain, because nobody wants to hear that you're tired. And we all say, "Oh, I feel really tired." Who cares? Nobody cares. We all feel tired sometimes. We don't need to hear you moan and complain that you're tired the whole time. So if you can't catch yourself doing it, you should probably stop, because you're only just reinforcing that feeling in yourself as well. If something major happened, if you got a phone call and you suddenly inherited £1 million, or you won the lottery, or something positive happened to you, you bumped into a woman who became the love of your life, you certainly wouldn't feel tired anymore. You'd suddenly feel a whole lot better. So stop telling yourself you're tired.
About when people say they're tired, excluding any terrible night's sleep or something like that.
Yeah,
it's really that they're not enthusiastic about their life at that moment. Yeah. So if you're enthusiastic about something, say you've got something that's about to happen that you can't wait to happen, you're not thinking about how tired you are, and you're not going to say to someone, "I'm just really tired," if you're really enthusiastic about an event that's about to happen. So it's really about how you feel about your life at that moment.
That's true. Do you know, the other day I felt really tired, and do you know what I did?
What's that, mate?
I went to bed. It was about 1:30 in the morning. I was like,
I don't know.
Really tired. I could hardly keep my eyes open. But yeah, totally. give honest and sincere appreciation for people. That's one of the most powerful tools in the world. And everyone loves to be appreciated. It's really, what drives us, what makes us feel, we all want to feel that we've got a reason to be here in life. We all want to feel that we're doing something positive, that we're valued, that we kind of are important in some small way. So show people, everyone wants to feel that. It's a win-win-win. Just show them that you appreciate them. And funnily enough, this is something that, if you fancy a girl, for example, and and you don't know what to say, show her that you like her, but don't tell her that you love her. That's all I can say about this. That's a whole nother subject as well. But show her that you're interested in her, but don't show that you're creepy. There's a balance to these things. But in general, show people that you're interested. Just don't get creepy about it. So
that's not in the book, is it?
I realized when I started saying that there's just such a huge topic in its own right, and it's not something that I'm interested in right now or prepared to talk about. So, but maybe for another day. Arouse in the other person an eager want. So to get something from another person, we must forget our own perspective and begin to see things from their point of view, from the point of view of others. When we can combine our desires with their wants, they become eager to work with us and can mutually achieve our objectives. So you're aligning yourself with what the other person wants. Instead of thinking about what you want, think about what they want. I don't know if you can think of a nice little example of that.
Well, Zig Ziglar used to have that as a phrase. Maybe it was inspired by How to Win Friends and Influence People, but his phrase was, in order to get everything you want, you have to give people what they want. And he used to say that all the time.
Well, that makes sense. And that's the art of selling as well. And that's the art of everything. It's like in the Wolf of Wall Street, where he says, sell me this pen. And one guy goes, this is a great pen. This is lovely. It's a work of art. It's a really nice pen. How much do you want to pay for it? And he says, I'm not paying it. What about you? And he goes, this pen, it writes, and forget about that. And he goes to another guy, he goes, show them how it's done. And he goes, see this pen? I said, yeah. He said, hey, write me your signature. Let's see your signature. And the guy goes, well, I can't, I haven't got a pen. He says, do you want to buy a pen? So you need to show someone that they want something. And then when they want it, they will come to you. But until such time as they want it, forget about it. Dr. Robert Cialdini, here's another guy who comes up with 7 principles of influence, I think he calls it. And he talks about an example as well. I'm sure he's been inspired by this book because this book came out first, and almost all of the people who are saying really positive things, really they come from this. But in actual fact, when I listened to the audio book version of this book many times, the more I listened to it, the more I kind of realized that there's a lot of similarities between a lot of these concepts and the concepts that Jesus was talking about in the Bible, and Buddha and all these other sort of, I mean, I don't know much about the other religions because I was raised in the UK in a Church of England, which meant that they very rarely went to church. But so I'm not very religious, but what I would say is that I noticed a lot of the ideas and the themes sort of have been around for a very, very long time, and they all make perfect sense. Don't get angry, don't argue with people, give honest appreciation for people, treat people fairly, become genuinely interested in other people. And well, first I just want to say, Dr. Robert Cialdini, he mentions he went to a gym in Arizona, his gym, and he said, in the gym there was this guy at the front desk folding towels. He says, why is it in gyms there's always someone folding towels? But nevertheless, he went out to his car and he realized that he'd locked his key in the car. I mean, this is going back a few years and it wouldn't happen now probably, but he locked his car key in the car, so he couldn't get into his car, and his phone and everything was there in the car as well. So he went to the front desk, and he was a member of this gym. He, paid a monthly subscription, and he said to the guy, "Excuse me, can I make a phone call? I need to call my wife so that she can come with her spare key to the car because I've locked my key in the car." And the guy folding the towel said, "I'm afraid we can't let the clients use the phone." And he got angry at this because obviously he's a paying client, and he felt that he hadn't been appreciated and he hadn't been valued, and he was in a moment of trouble, and he needed to use the phone. And he said, "Look, this is the situation. I just need to make a very quick phone call. Please let me do it." The guy goes, "No, if I let you do it, then everyone's going to want to do it." And he got angry with this guy, and it was very confrontational. And you can imagine he was already pretty annoyed because annoyed with himself because he'd locked his keys in the car, and he was in ridiculous situations, embarrassing for him, and so on and so forth. And the guy folding the towels didn't care about any of this at all. He'd been told that the customers can't use the phone, and he was sticking to it. So Dr. Robert Cialdini had a really rough time, and he got the manager out and so on and so forth, and it got all very heated. And the long and short of it is, I believe he cancelled his subscription and told all his friends never to go there again, all on the back of that. However, he said, thinking about it, I could have completely turned that around the other way. I could have aligned myself to the guy who was folding the towels. I could have said to him, "Look, this is the situation. I've left my what an idiot." I could have been humbled in front of him. What can I do for you that you would allow me to just use the phone, or can you use the phone to just call my wife and we'll solve this situation? It's talking about, being polite to the guy, aligning himself with obviously the guy's not allowed to use the phone. The client's not allowed to use the phone, but this is an unusual circumstance. So it's about finding a different way, and it's about not getting angry with people, and trying to get, to understand their point of view. And it's not always easy. And another thing is, again, it's one of the ways to make people like you is to be a good listener. So encourage other people to talk about themselves. So, and talk in terms of the other person's interests when you do talk to them. And he gives an example in the book, which is a brilliant example. He was sitting at another dining table, presumably either before he made that faux pas about the Bible, or it was a different group of people altogether. But he was sitting next to a botanist at a dining table, and he didn't know anything about botany, but he knew enough to be polite and interested and ask the guy about botany. He said, "I've got to admit, I know very little about botany. So, what is it that you study, or what do you do?" And the guy was delighted to explain all about botany, because nobody ever wanted to hear it. It was always such a boring subject. But he was delighted to be able to have someone who was genuinely interested in him, and he spent the whole evening explaining all these things about botany. So Dale Carnegie learned an awful lot about botany, and partly it wasn't just boring because he was asking questions in terms of what the botanist would like. So why do you do that? Where do you go? There's always interesting things that you can take from any subject. You don't have to just listen to someone doing a monotone about, well, this plant comes from the Amazon rainforest, and it's only found halfway up the silver birch tree that can only be grown in the climatic conditions with the soil type. No. It was, you can bring to the conversation. So you make some, insightful comments like, "So, you practice botany here. Where did you learn it?" And just get people to talk about themselves. That way you learn about them. And at the end of this meal, apparently the botanist went to the host and said, "That Dale Carnegie, he is the most wonderful person I've ever met. He's the best conversationalist I've ever met. And the ironic thing was that Dale Carnegie barely said a word all night.
I think I might be wrong, but I think it was like the most interesting man I've ever met.
That's
irony because the other guy did all the talking.
Exactly. So there you go. So it's about listening and being a very good listener and being interested in what the other people say. It's not always easy, but it is a lot easier if you don't automatically assume that they're going to be boring. Any topic should be interesting, given the right spin. And if it's interesting to someone, then there must be a reason why it's interesting. So you could even ask them, what got you interested in botany? Why is it, a lot of people say it's boring, but it's clearly something you're passionate about. So why are you interested in botany? Or why are you interested in stamp collecting or whatever else it may be? So be genuinely interested in other people. And that's really, really important. There's all sorts of other things. A lot of it is business related. A lot of things are about, related to sales as well. For example, one of them, there's a white van company he mentions, and there's another company, Howitzer company, or something like that. And there was a salesman, and he said he used to argue because the Howitzer van was better than the white van, or whatever the other company was called. And he was, if he went to try and sell a fleet of vans to a company, they'd say, "Oh yeah, but the white van, I'm happy with the white van. The white van's good." And he'd go, "Now listen, the white van is a good van, but the Howitzer van is better." And he would end up having arguments, and he didn't sell very much. And he'd be arguing with these people about how good his van was. And the irony is that the more he argued about his van being better than the white van, the more he was arguing with the person he was trying to sell. And the more entrenched in the view that I'm going to buy the white van, the other man became. So eventually he went to Dale Carnegie and he listened to his lectures, and he tried a different approach. And the approach that he tried was to say, "Yep, now you're right. The white van is a very good van. It's a really good van, and it will do your job perfectly. Now, our van can do that as well. And as a bonus, you get this and you get that." And he was no longer arguing with people. He never had another argument with clients at all, because you're never going to sell to someone you're arguing with. And he got a lot more sales off the back of it, because he's not saying that the competition's rubbish. They already know the competition's not rubbish. It's a good product. But he's highlighting the positive things about his own product. And there's so many other things. We could go on and on and on. It's a huge, all-encompassing book that gives. It helps you grow your emotional intelligence. So it allows you to become better in your relationships, in your work relationships, in your business relationships, in your personal relationships, and in your romantic relationships. And it's for that reason I must have listened to it 20 times at least. And that's I'm not exaggerating when I say that.
You bring up a good point, because there's a couple of things that have come up in the call. A couple of bits what we've talked about with respect to memory techniques. And then another one, which I think would be quite an interesting topic, which I actually don't know that much about, but I know that you've done some research into, is emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
So what do you think about one of those two as a topic for the next call?
I'm all over it. I mean, like we talked about in our last one, when you get into the habit of listening to audiobooks and learning new things, it's addictive. And, when you finish one, you just want to, that you've hopefully gleaned, even if it's just one little bit of knowledge, then, you just want more, you just need to learn a bit more. And when you and I work together in an office in Brighton, we would be listening to audiobooks while we were working, And the funny thing is, I would, I may have listened to How to Win Friends and Influence People any number of times. And the funny thing is, or any other book for that matter, and I'd listen to them again and again and again on repeat, because I was only sort of half paying attention to them because I was working. And when you're working, you just can't give your entire attention to it. So I would listen to it, and I'd listen to it again, and I'd listen to it again. And sometimes I'd have listened to an audiobook 6 or 7 times, and then suddenly I would notice something that I'd never noticed before. And I'd be like, wow, that's a really important point. That's something, almost paradigm shifting sort of idea. And it was really weird, because it's like, how did I miss that the first 6 times that I listened to this, But maybe it took all those times. Maybe I'd heard it, but just not been in the right frame of mind to understand it or appreciate it. Or maybe I just wasn't paying attention. I just don't know. But I would listen to audiobooks again and again and again. And then we would walk. We lived quite close to each other, so we would walk back after the day, wouldn't we? We call it the mastermind. What did we call it?
I don't know. It's probably, we referred to it as a type of mastermind.
Yeah, the mastermind walk or something like that, and where you'd been listening to stuff and learning new ideas, and I'd been doing it, and we would just like throw all these ideas, bombard each other with all these ideas and concepts, and that made going to work a pleasurable experience. That sort of learning these new ideas and then having someone that I could throw the ideas at. Because when I'd get home and I'd speak to my wife and kids, and I'd go, oh, look at this and look at that. And they weren't in the kind of same frame of mind. But I think you and we'd both spent the day getting through our work. And, we both worked very hard, but at the same time, listening to these audiobooks and learning new concepts and ideas. And it was it's a really, really good thing. So I would recommend to anyone that if they've not read or listened to an audio version of How to Win Friends and Influence People, then they certainly should. It will help improve your life. I mean, there's no other way of putting it. It's the other thing is, about just before I nearly forgot. Another thing about it is the letters section. I like the letters section because he would read letters. Dale Carnegie wrote down these letters, and he would read the letters out, and it would be, so, dear such and such a company, we at the electric company supply more electricity to more people, and we do it for a cheaper rate, and we're growing, and we would like to have offer you some kind of deal, and blah blah blah, and he would be like, he would then sort of do a critique of the letter, and he'd say, well, it's an absurd letter. It's completely absurd. Dear, this is how it reads to the person who's reading it. Dear somebody or other, we are far bigger and busier and more important than you. Look how big and fantastic we are compared to you. And then at the very end of the letter, it would say what they actually want. It's completely unempathetic, and it's not using any of the concepts. And in fact, most letters are kind of, even now, and the way people talk are like that as well. We write emails all day long, every day. And I have certainly learned a great deal and I've been complimented by any number of people on the way that I put together my emails. And even when it's quite confrontational, the subject matter, I always structure them in a way that is kind of similar to the way that Dale Carnegie teaches in How to Win Friends and Influence People. And that is first to be nice, to appreciate the person. I've seen so many emails where they don't say your name. Hi, Tom, They just rush straight into the email, and that's fine, and it's much more informal, and we're used to it when we're texting and stuff like this, so that's okay. But with a client, you should always put their name, because it feels more personal and they like it. And then say, how are you doing? How are you? Show them a bit of that you're interested in them. I mean, it may not be, and this is the other thing that's in the book as well. It's like we're not very good at recognizing when a compliment is genuine or not, but we all like a compliment.
We all like a genuine compliment. Yeah.
We all like a genuine compliment. We all like a compliment that is genuine. We don't like an obviously fake compliment. But the thing is, we're not very good at judging what is a genuine and what's not genuine. So if you say, "How are you?" it's a manner of speech, But it is usually not included. I remember there was one of the marketing managers at the company I was working for, I nearly mentioned the name, read an email that I wrote. I had to write an email, and she was sitting beside me at the time, and I said, "Dear so-and-so," and I said, I hope this email finds you well, or I hope you're well. And she said, "Are you going to write that?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I always write something like that." And she's like, "Oh, all right." And then a couple of weeks later, I got an email from her, and I noticed that she'd completely changed, because she'd emailed me regularly, and she'd completely changed after having seen the email that I wrote. She'd completely changed the way that she structured her emails. And she wrote to me, "Hi, Jake, how are you? Did you have a nice weekend?" And then she went into it. And the first thing you want to do is, if you've got a client and the client is upset with you about something, or you want to sell something to them, you've got to raise in them an interest in what it is that you're trying to sell. If they're upset about something. So you need to say that right at the beginning. "I appreciate that you're upset about such and such. You don't want to be overly apologetic. You don't want to admit responsibility if it wasn't your fault, but you need to show appreciation that they're upset." So there's a fine line in doing that. You definitely don't want to take things on as yours, or admit responsibility when it's not your fault. And you don't want to labor the point and sort of highlight that it is your fault if it isn't. But you do need to, if it is your mistake, you need to admit responsibility for everything. That's about taking personal ownership. And these are all concepts that the book talks about in some detail. But so if you've got an email like that, you've got a client who's upset with you, "Dear Mr. So-and-so, I hope you had a nice weekend. I hope this finds you well. You can say, I appreciate that, you're unhappy with such and such," or, and then you go on to tell them how you're going to fix it straight away. So, I understand that you're concerned about such and such an issue, and then you can say, "We have looked into this, and we've come up with proposed the following solution. We propose to do this to fix your problem." And then afterwards, when they're happy and they're like, "Yeah, this guy's on my side. He appreciates, he understands me," then you can go on to say what it is that you want from them, and they're actually going to be maybe okay to take that from you. Whereas before, if you just ignored their own how upset they were, or you just launched into it saying, "We're going to fix this, and this," you're not appreciating that they weren't happy. And so they're going to feel still unhappy. But as soon as you show that you understand their point of view and you appreciate it and you're doing something to fix it for them, they'll be very happy with any suggestions that you do. And they will also feel that you are on their side, and they will feel closer to you. And you've won yourself a friend. So it's a bit like that, really. And so the letters section I really like, and I've used them a great deal to improve my emails.
A good description.
Details with clients.
A lot of value there.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Well done, Jake.
There's an awful lot more in it, and I mean, there literally isn't the time, and I
think it's actually, at least at one time anyway, I haven't looked at it for a while, but I think it's actually for free on YouTube anyway, so people don't mind listening to it. I think it's like a 9-hour audiobook or something like that.
Yeah.
You can make your way through every now and again.
Yeah, and you can dip in and out of it, and there's all sorts written about it. It's in the public domain. So you can...
I wasn't certain that it was in the public domain.
Well, maybe it isn't, actually. Yeah, it probably isn't. It was published in 1936. Dale Carnegie died, but I'm not sure when. If I can go on to Wikipedia, it will tell me when he died, presumably. And then it's 75 years after that, is it? I think, or is it 50 years? I think it's 50 years.
I might be wrong. I know we've done a little bit of stuff on this, but I don't think it's to do with. I think it's to do with when the book was published, rather than if the author's dead or not, because people inherit those rights, I think.
No, it's not, because I inherited rights as well, because my great-grandfather was a playwright and actually made some of the first, did screenplays, and most of his plays were some of the very first films, funnily enough. But nobody watches them anymore. The production value and stuff, they were the very, very early films. But I still inherit. He died in 1980 or 1981. No, 1984. And I still get royalties from him on a yearly basis. Usually not very much money, but occasionally, I got £2,700 one year when somebody put on one of his plays in the West End for a few weeks. So he died in 1984. I still get royalties. I only get 1/20th of his royalties, which goes to show sort of how much money he's making when someone puts on a play. But Dale Carnegie died in he was born in 1888 and died in 1955, aged 66. So I think it's 50 years after his death, and it is. So that would make it 2005. And from 2005 onwards, it would be in the public domain. But public domain law varies from country to country, territory to territory. So you'd need to double check with that. But yeah, so there you go. It is available, freely available, and thoroughly to be recommended if you are, if you value your relationships and friendships, and you got a bit of time, you can go running and listen to it. You can listen to it while you're working, depending on what kind of job you've got. You can listen to it in the car every time you take a little drive, little bit by little bit. There's so many ways you can do it, which are not really going to interfere even with your day. So not having time really is no excuse. What would be an excuse is that you're not ready to read it and you're not interested, in which case don't read it, wait until you are ready. But yeah, it will definitely help in so many ways: business, sales, personal relationships, and romantic relationships.
There you go. Good review.
Thank you very much. I must say that there are other ones as well that he wrote. How to Win Friends and Influence People is the most famous. But my wife suffers from anxiety. And luckily she's got it under control now, but it is a sort of lifelong affliction that she gets anxiety attacks every now and again if things happen. And so there's another book that I read for her. I don't suffer from anxiety, although I know it's extremely common. But he did another book as well, which is if you know anyone who worries about things and gets depressed about stuff and things like that, there's another book which is amazing, which he did, which addresses that specifically. So it's much more clearly defined on a particular issue. And it's called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And if you like How to Win Friends and Influence People, and you worry yourself about things, or you know someone who worries about things, and we all know someone like that, then that's definitely a good book for them.
Was there a public speaking one as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, there is. There's he's done a whole bunch, his whole series. If you're interested, you can find out more information, and most of his works are available, I think, on the public domain. Bearing in mind that, the original version of his book may be in the public domain, but the sort of later versions, which were published later on, are not. So, presumably they're not. Maybe they are. I don't know. But you'd need to check on that. But he's got a lot of books. Some of them are about public speaking. If you're going to be a public speaker, I definitely recommend that. Anything to do with sales, public speaking, he was involved in the sort of business world, so that was his basis. That's where it sort of came from, and it sort of developed because a lot of them are, skills and techniques that apply in all areas of life. But very fascinating, really good book. Cannot say enough about it.
So the interwebs, which never lies, says that How to Win Friends and Influence People is in the public domain in Canada.
Yeah.
And that's all that I've been able to ascertain there.
Okay. Well, there you go. That doesn't lie. So Canadians, you're all going to have more friends and be able to influence people. It's I mean, I'm very happy to talk. I don't know what you want to talk about. I think, another I quite like talking about books that have had quite a big impact on my life. And, there are a bunch of other ones. We went to a property meeting. I can't remember who it was. Do you remember, Tom? And we were sitting there, and it was it was kind of in a hotel sort of lecture room kind of thing, and what do they call it? A conference room. And one of the speakers came up and he said, "Hands up in this room, everyone who's read Rich Dad Poor Dad." And I looked around, and there was almost every single person in the room, which was a couple of hundred people at least. Almost everyone in the room had their hand up, which I thought was remarkable. So a certain type of person tends to read the same kind of books, I think. And I'd say a lot of them have probably also read How to Win Friends and Influence People, and probably The Richest Man in Babylon as well. There are certainly a bunch of books that stand out to me that I would certainly recommend to people. And another one is Rich Dad Poor Dad. That's definitely not in the public domain, but it's got a kind of a unique twist, really. It's got a way. I mean, there's a paradigm shifting sort of element to that as well, and it kind of really makes you think about business and finance, not business necessarily, but about personal finance. And it's essentially about how how two different people, he's got a rich dad and a poor dad, and the poor dad is the highly educated one, and the rich dad is the one who, instead of relying so much on education, educates himself financially. They both thoroughly believe in the power and importance of education, but they just have completely different point of view as to what education is and should be. And so it's quite an interesting. It's a very, very interesting read. And again, it's by a guy called Robert Kiyosaki. I don't know if you want to speak about that. I know that you've read that and you introduced that to me as well. So, but there's all sorts of other books. And it doesn't really matter what you think of the individual person. And Robert Kiyosaki, you may think, oh, he's fantastic, and you might say, well, I don't really get on with him. But some of the ideas that he puts forward in his book are phenomenal and definitely worth reading, even if even if they don't sort of automatically make a great deal of sense to you in your personal situation. But so there's a bunch of other books out there. I'm very happy to talk about any of them. That's one that kind of immediately springs to mind, but there's lots more.
Well, we can maybe at some point in the future we can do another call on the Rich Dad Poor Dad thing, and just do like a little what our thoughts are on it. Thinking about what I said with respect to the next call being on one of two topics. Quite like to do one around memory techniques if you're cool with that, because I think that's. You can't think of anything. What?
Remember any of those techniques?
Well, they actually help me a lot. I think I don't know if they're relevant in every instance. So I certainly don't use them in every day-to-day type of activity. But when you are trying to, let's say you've got to remember something like a speech or something like that, it's good to have something like that up your sleeve so that you've got like a technique for remembering it, or you've got a test or something like that.
Yeah, let's do that. I think
they're really the various techniques for remembering certain topics, like using your unconscious mind, or like the Roman room technique, memory palace, that type of stuff. I think we should have a call on that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I because I love watching Darren Brown, and he comes up with some stuff that I don't really like, if I'm honest. He's a little bit this reliance on hypnotism and things like this, I'm not keen on. But I very much like the sort of experiments and stuff, and the sort of more psychology side of things. And and he addresses that in this memory techniques. And I read listened to an audiobook of his, which is about memory techniques and stuff that he uses, and it's absolutely fascinating. And we tried it out I tried it out with my daughters, and years later we could remember. I think it was a series of 10 or 20 different things randomly put together. And if I think about it now, I can probably remember them all. They won't mean anything to you.
Well, he uses it for like counting cards type activity, doesn't he?
Oh yeah. In fact, there are there's world memory championships and stuff like this. It's they've turned it into almost a sport.
Yeah. How quickly can you memorize the order of a pack of cards? Yeah. I saw that a little while ago.
Yeah,
some of them are amazing. But then when you figure out what they're doing, you actually, I mean, I know that a whole pack it takes some work to get to that point, but it's actually easier than you might imagine it to be.
Yeah. Yeah, there are lots of different techniques. I went to New York years ago with my wife. I took her there as a Valentine's treat, actually. It was brilliant. This was years ago when I was living in Spain when I first married her, and then we moved back to the UK just before I met you. And they introduced this direct flight from Malaga to New York, and it was aimed at trying to get people from New York to Spain. And it was very, very cheap, way cheaper than normal. It was like £300 return or €300 return for both of us. So off we went to New York. And we stayed right near Madison Square Gardens, a really nice hotel. It was very expensive, but the flights were cheap, so it kind of made up for it. And we were in the middle of winter because it was February the 14th. I took her, and she'd always wanted to go on a helicopter. And so I'd arranged this, and I'd bought a ticket. You can do these helicopter flights then around Manhattan Island. And so I planned it all out. She had no idea, and she thought the Valentine's thing. This was the Valentine's trip, but in fact, the Valentine's trip was the helicopter flight around Manhattan. So I walked her down. And we saw where the Twin Towers had been. It was quite emotional, actually. It was pretty horrible. It was only a couple of years after that happened. It was a huge hole, really, where it was, and you could see all the smashed up things, and there was flowers, and it was quite an emotive scene. And then we walked down Wall Street, and I was blown away about how small Wall Street was, because I'd spent 4 years in London, and the city of London is way bigger. Wall Street in itself is very small, but again very high. And then we walked down to have a nice view of the Brooklyn Bridge. And there was a helicopter taking off. And I said, oh, well, let's go and have a look. There's a helicopter landing site there, as if by surprise. And we walked up to the helicopter landing site and went right up to the door. And the doorman said, I'm sorry, unless you've got a ticket, you can't come. You can't come any further. And my wife said, oh, yeah, we don't have any tickets. And I whipped the tickets out of my pocket and I said, yes, we do. And so this was a really, really lovely thing, took her on this Valentine's flight around the Statue of Liberty and all the rest of it.
Smooth move, Jake.
I know, romantic. Eh? Anyway, that's I suppose that's relevant to How to Win Friends and Influence People, actually, because it's paying attention to the little things. She'd mentioned to me that she'd always wanted to fly in a helicopter. An opportunity presented itself, and I took the opportunity, and I gave her what she most wanted. So I showed her that I really appreciated her, and it was a sort of tailored thing to her. If she had a fear of helicopters, it definitely wouldn't have had the same result. But I mention this because when we were on our little trip around New York, we went to the Central Library, which is an amazing building. I'd recommend to go to New York to anyone who hasn't been to it. It's an amazing place. And in the library, there was this little deck of cards, and it was memory cards. And each card had a different memory technique that you could use. And there was literally I don't know, 50 cards or something with 50 different memory techniques. And I thought, oh, wow, I've got to have that. And I bought it. And I can't remember where the cards are. I've lost them. I just have no idea where I put them. So I obviously needed, then hopefully, you know, the next time I buy something like that, there'll be, one of the cards will be how to remember where you put your stuff. So yeah, I wish I could dig that out. That would be really useful for our chats on memory techniques. But yeah, just I did remember the helicopter ride, even if I didn't remember where the cards were.
There you go. Well,
so yeah, let's do that.
Cool to wrap it up there.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. All right. Well, love the call, and well, I look forward to the memory techniques thing.
Sounds good.
All right. Take it easy.
See you, buddy.
Bye.